by myself.
Yeah, we got 2 graduations this weekend. And then we have our daughter graduating next weekend. So. Kind of that time of year.
Yeah.
This meeting is called to order. There will be an opportunity for members of the public to speak at the end of the meeting. Sarah, please call the roll.
For the record, the State Highway Commission is assembled in Lincoln, Nebraska at the NDOT headquarters. The date is May 20th, 2022. Time is 8:27 a.m. A copy of the Open Meetings Act is posted in the room. Commissioner Koppel, he's going to attend virtually. He hasn't jumped on yet. Commissioner Gertis.
Present.
Commissioner Hawks.
Here.
Commissioner Pindig.
Here.
Commissioner Leafgreen.
Here.
And Commissioner Wolford.
Here.
The next order of business is review and approval of the March 25th, 2022 meeting minutes. Sarah, please call the question.
Wait.
So moved.
Second.
Commissioner Gertis.
Yes.
Commissioner Hawks.
Yes.
Commissioner Kindig.
Yes.
Commissioner Leafgreen.
Yes.
Commissioner Wolford.
Yes.
All right, approved.
Okay, our introductions for this morning. We have Rusty Cimarol from the Federal Highway Administration here. Welcome, Rusty. Do you have any other to be introduced? We have, or is there any announcements at this time? If not, we'll begin our business meeting with remarks from our director, Mr. John Selmer. John?
Thank you, Madam Chair, Commissioners. Good morning. It's great to be together and see you all again. We have quite an agenda today. I think it's going to be a very interesting meeting. As I already indicated to Ryan, he's got a lot of questions he's got to answer.
You really drew a short straw.
Yeah, he did. Well, we're going to have a good time today. We got a great agenda, and I'd like to cover, a few things, specifically some things we've been doing internally. I've been here a little over a year now, and so typically what happens when you have a new director is you kind of review the vision, mission, direction of the agency and take a look at whether that's in alignment with my expectations, with the governor's expectations, and I would say generally, so yes. I don't see a lot of need within the agency, but we're always seeking to improve and figuring out how we can reach the objectives of our mission in a way that's transparent and accountable. And so what we did last fall, we had a meeting basically of much of our leadership to kind of review where the agency has been in the past 5 or so years. We looked at our mission statement at that time, and we decided we were going to tweak it a little bit. The one that we have now is we enhance quality of life through convenient, safe, and innovative transportation system. And we picked those words. Convenience is a different word. I've even had discussions nationally about that. That word makes some individuals uncomfortable because of the difficulty in which to measure it. But really, all of us, when we use the transportation system, we want to use it the way that we want to use it. We want it to be convenient. We want it to be there. We don't even want to think about it. We also have an expectation that it's a safe transportation system. That if I go out and utilize it, I'm going to be able to get home safely or go to wherever I need to go safely. And that's a strong expectation. And I think there's another desire, too, in terms of innovation. And we can't just compare ourselves with other similar agencies, but really with society as a whole in terms of how technology, how creativity is being utilized, and how can we incorporate that within the agency. So we looked at that and felt that those were good themes, concepts to provide a North Star in terms of where we want to head as an agency. In that 5-year period prior, there were 4 key focus areas that were developed, and we said those are still good focus areas, and we're going to keep those. We challenge our business practices, we develop our workforce, we serve our customers, we engage our partners. And so those are key areas in which then typically I said is, okay, we've got the theory, the concept, now how do we make sure that the rubber meets the road? How do we get tangible results, and how do we start looking at this in a way that we can start organizing our resources and actually have the outcomes that we desire? So in reviewing that, we spent a day and a half last fall in Nebraska City trying to come up with some key outcomes. What do we believe are the areas that we should be working on specifically in the next 5 years? And from that, come up with 1 year and 5 year strategies, goals as we proceed. And we're going to be reviewing this annually as to what modifications need to be made and what progress has occurred. So those 5 key outcomes, and we'll make sure we get this all to you. Is this in the packet? I guess I didn't look, but we'll make sure. But the 5 are enhanced project delivery that is predictable and reliable. And so we realize that delivering a program isn't just for ourselves. There are many stakeholders dependent upon that schedule, whether it's local jurisdictions and trying to look at coordination, whether it's companies, private individuals dependent upon that, looking at where they should be investing, timing, that we really need to have something that's reliable out there that people can depend upon as they're also making significant decisions. The next is modernize operational and financial systems. We have a lot of systems that are still legacy systems, mainframe systems that you can't find people to maintain some of that are I guess, hold the keys really to the agency in terms of critical processes. And so we need to actively engage and look at that, not only on existing processes, but future needs and how we start handling data and understanding information that's needed for decision making. The third one is make this the most desirable place to work. And how can we do that? All DOTs across the country, I think even state agencies, even private companies are struggling with retaining a workforce and having qualified individuals. And how can we make this a place that people want to come? Money's one thing. Money we don't necessarily have control over in terms of salary, but we do have control over the environment and the opportunity that we can create for individuals that are part of our team. The next is become the delight of the people we serve. I would say this was the most controversial one because of the word delight. And it conveyed different thoughts to different individuals. Personally, I like the word because delight speaks to me of going above and beyond, of surprise, of a surprise that's a good surprise. And that's what we should be striving for. It's more than just serve the public. I think we should make it such that if the public does need to engage with the agency, they feel good afterwards and said, you know, that wasn't a tough deal, or I actually feel better from engaging than feeling worse in working with this. And then the last is strengthen and enhance relationships with our partners. So you can see how these tied with the key focus areas. We've developed 5 teams that have got into much more specifics, and we'll be willing to share more of that as to really what are the tactical strategies in which to start accomplishing these things. And I'm looking forward to it. We've had some very good internal conversation in terms of how to proceed. And as always, as we're trying to implement change, there's always the tyranny of the urgent. What I call is we're trying to build a plane while we're flying it. And we still got to keep the lights on. And so there's that tension between the urgency of today and the important concepts or areas that we really need to develop. So are there any questions on that? Thoughts? Like I said, we'll get that to you. And hopefully we're successful on it. I think there's data out there, 80% of the strategic plans or business plans fail. So we're trying to figure out a way to maybe beat that trend. The next area is, we'll have some topic discussion a little bit on EJA funding. Rusty's here too. You can give him all the hard questions on that. It's been fast and furious out there. We had a little conversation prior to the meeting about just the complexity of what's coming out and managing the different expectations between external stakeholders and the public as to really what this means. A lot of grant applications have come out. The desire of the administration is to get this money flowing very quickly. But I think that's also caused some frustration because of the amount of work that needs to be completed prior. So my feeling is this first go around in grants, you essentially had to be in the system years prior or had a concept or be ready to go. If you're just thinking, this money is available, I think I'm going to apply, it's not going to work that way for you this year. Or I would see that as being very difficult. Other issues that we're dealing with are just really interpretations. It's going so fast that I think even within the administration on the federal side is still working through interpretations as to what different definitions mean, such as Buy America. You can go on either extreme as to how you want to go with that. Looking at developing alternative transportation routes and where electrification is going to occur. There's issues such as, I believe, Justice 40 in terms of some of these grants that certain portions of the funding need to impact disadvantaged communities, and so how do we blend all this? So we've got a lot of work ahead of us in terms of interpreting this, and we've really made a commitment to try and help a lot of this, maybe not a lot, but there's some grants that actually the DOT cannot apply for. They're really for local jurisdictions and other groups out there, but we're trying to make ourselves available to help local jurisdictions, and we have met with the county association and with the MPO MAPA in Omaha to try and provide some guidance for them. There'll be more detail on this. Specifically, we have applied for a grant, a raised grant for the 275 project that we're developing up by Norfolk. And we're looking at different ways, and I have my own performance metric with the governor's office in terms of how many grants we're going to apply. Because as you look at it, there's probably more opportunity in money if we're successful on the grant side, the discretionary side. The formula side, our hands are kind of tied with inflation and other things. That's probably not going to move the needle as much as individuals think. So we're taking a look at the grants and seeing how we can do that. We'll have a conversation later on 6-laning of the interstate system. I know Amy's going to be talking about the surface transportation program also. But I think I've said a lot, so I think I'm going to quit talking here and get into the agenda, because I think we'll have some good dialogue with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Selmer. Are there any questions from the commission that you might have of Mr. Selmer?
You mentioned a lot of these grants are for local jurisdictions. Is there you've talked to counties, but what about, I haven't seen any information coming out on that. Is there a clearinghouse, or is the DOT acting as a place to put all these together? I know they're all in the bill, but I just kind of feel like you get down to the first-class city level, and they know there's money there, but what grants are available? Is there a clearinghouse somewhere that says, go here and see what's available? Or
I can help answer that. My name is Shannon Ankeny. I'm the Director of Communications and Public Policy here at NDOT. We are meeting with strategic planning and our local assistance divisions to put together a web page on the NDOT website that will help provide all that information so that local municipalities, counties will know where to go for information that's specific to Nebraska, and help them understand their requirements and what they need to do to apply for that grant money.
when will that be available?
We're meeting next week to start figuring out what we need to have on it, and we're hoping to get up fast.
Some of it's not all the guidance has been provided yet, and I know Federal Highway or US DOT has somewhat of a website discussing
Yeah.
bill and
Yeah, we
listing out the different components of it. So there is a website there on the federal side.
Right, and that has all the grants and when they're expected to come out. Once they come out, the notice of funding opportunities and how to apply for those. And we have been trying to get that information out to the various organizations such as the National NACE and other community organizations.
Well, I was hoping I'd hear to me, it makes sense that in Nebraska, DOT is kind of would take the lead on getting that out to cities and counties. I'm glad to hear that, because I think it makes sense that you guys are gonna be involved in it with the state level, so let's help the cities and counties too.
I really anticipate you to question and put Ryan to make his presentation, so he has all the answers that he
We should have Ryan first.
should have. Right.
Then the meeting's done.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from the commission? If not, I would thank you and your teams for all the hard work that you've put in, and looking forward down the road to see what Nebraska needs in their way of transportation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next on our agenda is our 2022 program book updates with Amy Starr, who is the NDOT Program Management Engineer. Amy?
Good morning, everyone. Happy Friday. Let's see if I can. Feels so nice to be with people again and not on a screen, so I'm actually really excited to be here. I'm going to talk a bit about our 2023 construction program that we're working on right now. Just a little bit about me before I get started. I lead the program management division, and our responsibilities include the construction fund management, project delivery, and civil rights protections for the state. So I'm going to spend some time this morning talking about the processes that we follow to develop our annual surface transportation program, which defines what we plan to commit to construction in the next year and the forecast for the following 5 years. Here we go. So there are two primary documents that we publish that are reflective of our strategies. And so I want to talk a little bit about those right now. You're probably relatively familiar with the Nebraska Surface Transportation Program book, and you have them right in front of you. That's a document that we publish every year that includes the 1-year construction program and the 5-year planning program. This includes projects that are funded by either state and or federal funds. And then we also disclose at the back of this booklet, if our forecast from the previous years resulted in a change, we explain why those changes occurred and give some context for why those things happened a little differently than forecasted. The second document that is a little bit less friendly for, I think, the public to digest, but is very important, is our statewide transportation improvement program. This is a federal requirement, and it's reflective of the state and local projects that either include federal funds or are considered regionally significant. And regionally significant is typically defined as it's a capacity project. You're building something that wasn't there before. This program has some different rules to it. It has some it needs to be financially constrained and meet federal requirements. So it's in a little bit different format.
There's a delay on
Okay.
the screen.
There we go. But this is just a quick overview of the typical contents. Each district has a map with the projects that are listed and an estimate, length, the location. And the map is displayed by two colors. Basically, one color, the red color, shows folks what we're planning to begin construction in the next year. And the blue represents all of the other additional projects that we know we need to do some work on, and we're preparing for those letting packages. The work that's contained within the construction program book is focused on highway, bridge, interstate, safety and ITS, and capital improvement. So next I want to talk a little bit about the cycle that we go through every year to develop this program. We have about 10,000 miles of highway and 3,300 state-owned bridges that we are assessing every year. And so the first thing that we do in the summer is our folks go out and assess the condition of our bridges and highways. And there are several different ways that we do that, but we go and assess the deterioration levels, compare what it looks like this year compared to what we thought it would look like last year. We're taking a look at what our projections were and either validating them or adjusting them as a result of what we see in the field. So we take all of that information and use decision trees and some pretty robust systems to assess life cycle cost analysis based on benefit cost ratios. We have risk rankings, and we run all of the information with the current condition and some of our decision trees to help us identify what the right strategy for each segment of road will be over the course of the foreseeable future. And those result in candidate lists that are provided to the program managers. So those are provided to the district engineers and the interstate folks and the bridge folks who are trying to assess the priorities for what to tackle first, second, and third, dependent on what the best strategy is for the prolonged life of that project and the life cycle that we're anticipating to get out of it. And annually, we track the performance of those projections. We have many different performance measures that, of just a few of the most common and impactful ones are displayed here. But we use these performance measures to assess the impacts of our strategies to determine whether our projections are performing as we anticipated, whether adjustments to maybe the buying power that we have for materials, how does that affect our longer term strategy of being able to maintain the goals that we have set to maintain these systems for as long as we can. So in the winter is the time where we're taking the projects that we have in progress, we're refining the estimates based on the more mature information that we have for a design or from permitting requirements and different feedback that we get from the public. We're also assessing the schedules that we can accommodate, considering now that we know more about what is going to be done before letting this project. We make adjustments to those schedules so that we can align the funding and the condition and the letting package so that they are as close to the projection of all three as possible. This is the time we're deciding which projects are going to be included on that one-year list. Which projects are we going to be committing to the public that our intent is to begin construction in the next year? And then similarly, which projects are we going to continue to invest our resources in preparing so that they can be ready for construction in the next 5 years? Then finally, in the spring, where we're at right now, is where we do finalize that list and we begin putting the program together. In July of every year, by July 1st, we publish the document, and following that, we use all of that information that we've gathered and assessed to support this STIP that is then published in consistent with the federal fiscal year, which begins in October of every year, and the state fiscal year begins in July. So there's a little bit of a delay, but we use the July 1st, the information that's included in the program book to then support the following federal STIP program. So every year when we're assessing what the construction program size will be, we're trying to figure out how much can we afford, how much do we have in contracts already that we need to be ready to pay for this season. We've got to follow some basic rules. We've got to make sure we can cover the payroll, keep the lights on, pay operating expenses, pay the contractors that are already on site, and we have to prepare for the fact that we are going to have emergencies. But ultimately, our intent is to invest as much as possible into the roads and bridges. So this year, here's a projection of what we anticipate will be published in early July. $658 million program, and it may be a little bit hard to see from where you're sitting. I'm glad you have a copy there. You can see the vast majority of our investments are planned for highway preservation, bridge preservation, interstate preservation, a little bit for research and planning. And this year in particular, the capital improvement program looks very small. That's because we are paying bills for quite a few of the capital improvements that have been have been let in the prior years. So Fremont Southeast Beltway, Highway 30, Heartland Expressway, Highway 75, all of those are in process, and so the revenues that were dedicated to capital improvement are being dedicated to paying those bills that we know we have. And as the cash flow balance begins to build again, we'll execute on additional capital improvement projects. We'll also be looking at grants to supplement our capital improvement related cash flow opportunities. And Ryan will talk a little bit more about that a little bit later in the agenda. So last but not least, just to give you a little bit of a flavor of the next steps, commissioners and district engineers, you can anticipate getting the draft for the next book in the next couple of weeks. We're a little bit behind schedule just because of resources, but we're getting very close, so you'll be getting those pretty soon. But the final record will be published on the NDOT website July 1. It will include an interactive GIS map that folks can kind of zoom in and zoom out on the different parts of the state that they're interested in learning more about. And then a PDF of the new program book will be available as well. Any questions?
Any questions from the commission? No, thank you very
All
much,
right,
Amy.
thank you.
This is a big job, big job putting all this together.
Got lots of good people working on it.
Next on our program is the IJA grant opportunities with Mr. Randy Huff, who is the Chief Strategy Officer for INHUB. Welcome, Randy.
I just realized that I'm going to be in big trouble with this presentation.
Ryan,
because it's
rather.
full of animations, and so if there's a 3-second delay, we're going to be sitting here. So I'm going to try and just sort of organically make this seem very smooth as we talk. But yeah, very, 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 very topical. This topic of discretionary grants is something that, as you mentioned, the locals are very interested in. We've already had done this presentation with NACO. We've already conducted we call it a grants workshop with our metro area partners in Omaha, trying to get them sort of oriented and acclimated to this concept of what is a discretionary grant, what goes into it. And so the presentation I'm going to give you today is going to kind of walk you through what goes into that, what is USDOT looking for, what does it mean when you apply, and sort of what are the opportunities out there. So this is the right direction.
I went down, yeah.
Okay, down. Yeah, computer. Okay, so as we kind of alluded to earlier, there's a lot of information out there. I just simply splash up the FHWA webpage should be on your presentation. But there's a lot of questions about there. There's lots of big numbers being thrown about there. In fact, there's a lot of confusion because IJA, or the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or bipartisan infrastructure law, sometimes gets confused with the money that's associated with the American Rescue Plan Act, the ARPA funds that was discussed in the legislature. So what are these funds for? There's confusion that, we just want this money for our project. And so this is, the IJA funding is specifically to refund our transportation programs. But there's a lot of money. So you see this $350 billion. What does it represent? How can we get it? What's coming to Nebraska? So I want to just quickly make that distinction of two types of funding that typically, so it was mentioned earlier, Amy's funding typically represents something called formula funding. This is money that just comes to us as Nebraskans. It's kind of a formula that Congress has that's based on kind of the attributes of our highway system, just our population, things like that. So all in all, it just comes to us. We don't really have to compete for it. There's fact sheets. There's actually a link on your website underneath there. It's very fine print, but you can look this up yourself. Nebraska will be getting $2.2 billion in formula funding over the next 5 years as part of this IDGA funding. But that's not what I'm here to talk to you about today. I'm here to talk to you about discretionary grants, which is a different type of funding. It's a type of funds that's assigned to the USDOT, not any particular state. They are the ones that manage these funds, and they have a process that they use to sort of award these funds, and it's based on the merits of your project. And so you've got to have a good project, and you've got to tell them about it, and they have this process which I'll be walking you through. It starts with the legislation, which has already happened. The next one is the pre-award, where they ask you to submit a project. Next, it moves on to the award, where we find your project to be in good standing, and we want to give you some money. And then you move on to the next phase, which people often forget about, which is the post-award phase. And I'll talk a little bit about that. So, just quickly, I want to walk you through what the opportunity is of that $350 billion. By our sort of calculations, there's about $88 billion. For things like transportation, but there are many other grant programs which are also part of that. There's energy and environment. There's also broadband and cybersecurity. So when you say discretionary grant pot, there's more than just transportation. There's many other things. But for this group, we're mostly interested in highways and bridges. But there are other things like ports and safe streets and electric vehicles and things like that. And then it's subdivided into who can apply. So you've got states, cities, counties, tribes. So what does it actually, how much is there for transportation for states and locals? We find that just based on our estimate, there's about 38 to 45 billion for transportation projects. So you got to understand that it's for specific purposes and people. And so you've got to figure out who it's for. And the way you do that is through something called the Notice of Funding Opportunity. This is what the USDOT publishes each year on these programs to tell applicants or people interested in this money what they're looking for. So what kind of projects are we looking for? What kind of funding do you need to bring to the table? And then other emphasis areas we mentioned, John mentioned Justice 40, but there's a lot of new emphasis areas out there related to resiliency and equity and underserved areas. And so they're looking for very specific things in your project that you need to address. And so this is just a snapshot from the RAISE website, and there's a link to that, but RAISE is already closed out for this, or at least for this spring. I put this note at the bottom. What's interesting about NOFOs is that they're hard to anticipate. I say that maybe they're not hard to anticipate, but they telegraph when they're coming, but they don't exactly tell you when. They say Q1 or in May or in June, and so you kind of know when they're coming, but you just got to be paying attention. So and I'll explain why paying attention is important in a second. So the NOFOs are the means by which they communicate what they want. The way you communicate that is through a grant application. And so I think most of us are familiar with that concept, where we have to put together a package that describes our project and what goes into it. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the things we traditionally put into these things. And so the things you see up here are things like, a map of the area, talking about the regional significance of the project. They want to see a project that is impacting more than just maybe a particular parcel of land or something like that. It has community benefit. I also put up here, this is a timeline we put in one of our grant applications. You want to demonstrate that this is a project that's been in the works, that it's committed, it's something that the community knows about. It's not a prerequisite to have a long history for a project, but it's something you want to describe in your storytelling. So, another thing is just what is it going to do in terms of safety? These are just very common things they want in there. There's a crash diagram. We include crash diagrams, and things like traffic analyses are very important for these types of applications, because they want you to do what they call benefit calculations. Your project has some kind of benefit to society, and so they want you to sort of numerically describe that. And so they have a very kind of strict, not process, but just methodology that you must follow to capture and report those benefits. Because if you just left it wide open, I could say, well, this benefits my cat, so I'm going to put that number in there. So it's very prescriptive in what you can take credit for, and that way they can do these analyses, or these comparisons apples to apples. So it's very set down, straightforward, but it is, these calculations do take some expertise and some methodology. I mean, we've done these before, and we've even had USDOT come back and say, well, our economist was looking through your analysis and you took too much credit here, and it's beyond my, I'm not an economist, so I didn't know what they were talking about. But we took it back to our people and we fixed it. But these can be challenging to fill out. But at the end of the day, it leads to this thing, that this number that they're looking for. You might be familiar, benefit cost ratio. Your project is typically, they want to see more benefit from your project in terms of dollars than the project costs. And so that's just a good sort of quick check to see if your project is good or not. Not every project is over one, and that's fine. It's not, again, a prerequisite to be over one, but it looks better, and that they're looking for higher numbers. So, you know, we've had ones that are under one before and ones that are over one. So over one is preferable to under. Other things you need to worry about and think about is just sort of environmental permitting, National Environmental Policy Act, all the environmental logs you have to follow. If you're going to apply for these funds, these are federal funds. So you have to, your project has to be federalized. That's my shortcut term to saying you must follow all the federal laws. And so we're used to that. We do that all the time. You know, it isn't very often that locals do projects that are using federal aid. And so this can be a barrier or a hurdle for local projects, I think maybe. Is just, you know, these laws are complicated, and you've got to do a lot of analysis to demonstrate that your project is following all those rules. One other thing is you've got to describe, you know, you'll be able to read this, but it's basically a table that breaks down how you're paying for your project. I mentioned earlier that they talked about how much you need to bring to the table. So sometimes it's 80% federal, and you've got to bring 20% of local funds to fund your project. It's not the same in every program, but the reason why they want you to tell them how much of funding you're bringing is because everyone's applying for these. And so if you can say, hey, I'm going to pay more than 20%, I'm going to pay 40%. Okay, great. We can take that other 20% and distribute it elsewhere. So the more you can sort of show that you're committed to your project, the more favorable that they will be in selecting your application. I'll just say lastly that you know, every project needs to have letters of support. These are just a shortcut. Shortcut for USDOT to understand that your project is supported locally by elected officials who represent a group of people. And so this is just very, very important for your project, is making sure that you've got support from your elected officials. Just quickly, I was just going to add all that up. Just to reiterate, your project needs to be federalized. That means following all the, you know, historical resource things, you know, just wetlands permitting, everything with the Corps. It can be a fairly lengthy process. That leads me to the next point is just that timetables for these are somewhat unpredictable. They come and go, and sometimes they're in the spring, sometimes they're in the fall. You got to be paying attention, and the reason that paying attention is doubly important is because the time frame to turn around an application isn't the same every time. Sometimes it's 3 months, sometimes it's 1 month. You have 1 month to put together all these analyses, your narratives, your descriptions, pull together your information, and submit it to the grants.gov website. So you've got to be watching and be paying attention. The next piece I want to reemphasize is that your project is competing nationally. So there are lots of great projects out there and many people applying. So it's important that your project not only fulfill the minimum criteria. Every project's going to do that. It's got to distinguish it somehow, and so that whether that be through just the calculations and numbers and analyses you put together. But more importantly, it's about the story you tell. This has been emphasized to us on several occasions. You got great numbers, but I didn't feel a connection to how this is going to help the community and quality of life. And so you've got to tell a story, and we've been told that over and over. And so anybody who's applying needs to make sure that the story is being told. So what that amounts to is, to win this money, you've got to play this game. You got to play this federal game, this application game, this storytelling game, if you will. Game maybe is not in the right word, but it is a competition. It's about the merits of your project. And I'll reflect on just last year's RAISE program. This is something you can go to the website. It's kind of hard to see, but they publish this packet of information with little dots on telling you where all of the awards went to. There were 800 applications for this program last year. And there was only 22 awards. Oh no, I'm missing 70 awards, ranging from 3 to 22 million. And so there's a lot of people that want this money, but not necessarily everyone gets it. And so the good news is that they give you a debrief on why you didn't win, and you can use that to refine your application. And over time, you can continue to resubmit year after year. And many times it takes a couple of times to submit before you get that application. So I will take just a minute to say that there are many more applications now than there has ever been. So we're been used to about 2 or 3 per year. There's at least 15 transportation-related grants coming out this year, I believe, just as just a rough number. And so maybe there's more opportunity. Maybe those 800 applications spread across 15 programs will be more easy to get an award, but maybe not. I'll mention those programs here in a second. Post-award. So you get an award, that's great, but the work doesn't end there. There's a post-award process where you still have to work with FHWA, provide reports and monitoring. You've got to follow procurement. You got to follow all of your commitments through construction. They say use the word term cradle to grave. It's got to follow the processes all the way to the end. And the reason that is because it's a reimbursement program. This is not I get an award, we write you a check and you deposit it and you go away. They watch you all the way to the end and you turn in all of the documentation and then they reimburse you at the end. So it's not, I put this image up here because I think it's funny, but it's just sort of demonstrates the idea is there's red tape all the way to the end. And so you've got to be willing and committed to fulfilling all of that throughout the process of your grant. Just quickly review, we don't need to spend a lot of time on this. There are many new grant programs, I mentioned that. There's lots of excitement out there. The details of what they're looking for in that NOFO, and I'll talk about a specific NOFO here in a second. The other thing is that your projects have to be ready. So, I think Khalil or John mentioned, you got to have these things in the pipeline. You can't just go, hey, there's money, which we want to do a project. We've been talking about a project over there forever. If you don't have some sort of preliminary design done, some sort of environmental analysis done, you won't be ready to go. So you've got to be working on these things now in order to get into your projects already. Applications take resources, whether it be people or time. You've got to write narratives, you got to do analyses, you've got to put it together in a way that sort of is cosmetically appealing, and you've got to be able to submit that to the thing. So there is a risk. You're taking time and effort to put this together and resource it, but you may not get an award. So and then once you get it, you've got to fulfill requirements. So it can be challenging. It's not as easy as I think it's made out to be. We got all this money, but you've got to go through these processes to get it. And so I want to quickly pivot to just a NOFO that is out right now. I highlight it because it's somewhat unique and it's timely. It's something called the Multimodal Project Discretionary Grant Program, MPDG. I know the acronym better than the actual name of the thing, but this year, because there's so many, FHWA or USDOT sort of bundled several of these projects, these grant programs together. They've never done that before. They bundled one called Mega, one called Infra, and another called Rural. They all have sort of the same emphasis, which is sort of transportation related. Things we're used to, making sure we have mobility for freight and stuff, job creation, economic development. But each of them are unique in different ways, whether it be their matching requirements. I'll take Mega, for example, is only for projects over $100 million. So if your project is not over $100 million, you couldn't apply for that one. The Infra, very traditional, one we've seen in the past years. We've applied for it many times, very straightforward and something we're used to. Rural is, I think, a newer one. I don't know for exactly, but it is only meant for projects in rural areas outside of sort of urban metro areas. Each of these come with a timetable. These three are on the same timetable. The NOFO was released in March, and we had 2 months to put together an application. It's actually due on Monday. I think we're submitting it today for several projects I'll mention here in a moment. But all of those projects have to be ready to go by 2025. You have to obligate the funds by 2025. So if you're, again, have to be ready to go, if I haven't said it enough. Couple projects that we are applying for. We already mentioned 275. We submitted this for RAISE, which is already done and gone. But we're also applying for the infra and the rural grants for this project as well. So RAISE, rural, infra, 3 different grant programs we've applied for this project. Another project we're submitting to the MPDG for all 3, the mega, infra, and rural, is I-80 west of Lincoln, the 6-laning, and maybe someone's going to talk about it. Okay, so anyways, we're going to talk about that project, but that's another project we're applying for a lot of money on to help sort of, supplement our program. Other programs, so I want to pivot to just what are these other programs, what do they represent? They represent a wide variety of sort of, I don't say use cases, but purposes. Highways and bridges are great, but they also kind of diversified these grants to include, safe streets, railroads, clean school buses, culverts. They all have very specific purposes for what they're intended. And I put the Safe Streets and Roads for All in highlight because that one just came out. And that one, as I think John mentioned, is only for locals. It's only for cities to apply for. State DOT can't apply. So again, you gotta watch the NOFO, see who's eligible. Some of this stuff is listed in the bill, and we've created a very elementary matrix that kind of tells us these things. But again, the guidelines, the details, the specifics still haven't come out yet. We've got to be looking for those in the NOFO. Those are going to be released soon. The ones that are coming here in the end of 2022. The other ones, Protect is a resiliency-based one. If you've got a project that's aiming to sort of improve, the resilience of your infrastructure to withstand, inclement weather or catastrophic weather events. That's what Protect is for. Healthy streets. You can read them, but there's a lot of opportunity, but they're all for sort of different pots and purposes and things like that. And so, again, we've been trying to engage with the public. We're working to develop a funding guidebook. I have a guy on my team who sort of orchestrates and organizes NDOT to apply for these. But it is a group effort, and all the hard work is done by people upstream of this process. Nick's group does a lot of work. Amy's group does a lot of work in helping us assemble this information even before we even know it's in a NOFO. So it's simply NOFO comes out, we start picking the pieces we already have developed and putting it together, and that's what a guy on my team does. And so it is truly a group effort, but it's you got to be ready to go. So I'll stop there, and I'm sure you've got plenty of questions for me.
Thank you, Ryan. Other questions from the commission, Ryan?
I have one.
Oh, by the way, Commissioner Koppel is joining us.
Good morning, everyone. You indicated that you've made the presentation to the Omaha. Have you made the presentation to cities the size of Scotts Bluff, North Platte, Kearney, Grand Island, Norfolk, Fremont, Columbus, so that they can get their resources gathered to try to make some applications for these local grants? Have you had a presentation with all of them?
We have not to my knowledge, just the county, just the NACO so far. So yeah, it's something that, again, I may have mentioned it, but only just the briefest of details has been included in the actual law about, it's simply about maybe its purpose, what the money is for, but details beyond that, we have very little. So this presentation is simply just something to just let you know there's going to be hard work, but getting them prepped for what they exactly need to assemble and the analyses and the right projects, that's a challenge. So yeah, it's certainly something we'd be open to doing, I think, because this is somewhat hard to understand, and if you're not ready, this would definitely get them sort of at least on the same page as everyone else about what it's going to take, right? So we would definitely be able to do that.
If I may, Commissioner, we're also waiting for the next opportunity. The League of Municipalities will have a workshop, and we intend to be part of that. The biggest challenge for us, which that's kind of the feedback that we got from some of those municipalities, is right or wrong or indifferent, we engage into the federal fund purchase program. So we took them away from the federal game by adding those flexibility to them with the federal funds. And so it's presenting a little bit of a challenging approach for them to try to come back. Most of their project, because of the buyout, they're all sort of followed a different path, followed the local type of processes that they have. And so that's where the challenge is coming. And but we still believe that there's some opportunity for them that that they could seek outside help to help them with the federal process. And so I think that's the goal, is we still want to present that information to them. Plus, Ryan mentioned that we're working on sort of I call it maybe a funding manual or package or guidance, if you will. It'll be on our website to your earlier questions, Commissioner. That's going to show the different type of grants, what are they means, what's their eligibility, etc. And we have committed to everybody from the local assistant division to Ryan division that anytime the snowfall comes, we push them out to everybody. And in the case of 2 days ago when we had that Safe Street, that got pushed from Jody Gibson to all the different partners that we have, just so they can see it, view it, and decide if there's really any interest. And we offer our assistance to answer questions as best as we can based on the information.
So you almost answered my question. You're close. Because it had to do with the buyout and the fact these are federalized, as you use the term, and we've gotten all the first-class cities out of the LPA business. And now in order for them to be eligible, they gotta get back in it. So is there a way the DOT can help with that and provide that LPA part if we did it through the districts? And you could assign, because we started that kind of at one point 10 or 15 years ago, and we had a local district project engineer helping with the cities and overseeing those. Is there a way that you could staff up through your LPA division and help these cities and provide that service in the construction side? Well, I mean, seriously, because you guys already know that business.
Yeah.
And now the cities are 10 years out of it, they're starting fresh.
I think it's gonna be difficult for all of us. Federal Highways having the same questions as they're doing it. There's additional things, services that are increasing even with the locals, irregardless of the grant program. So that's something that needs to be evaluated. I would say with our current staffing, it would be very difficult for us to do that and even try and get staffing. The issue isn't necessarily getting or having a spot, it's even hiring people with the expertise. So no, this is a difficult time for a lot of parties in terms of trying to get this money flowing through the system. Those are questions we're going to constantly evaluate, or issues.
I would just urge the department to not say no right off, that maybe there's a creative way we could do this, working with cities to see that this money does come to Nebraska, and it's a combined thing or something. That just keep looking at it like you're saying, and if we can figure out how to do this to help our first-class cities, we should do that.
And I think
Greg, I agree with you. I would hate to think that we establish a policy that eliminates this significant amount of funding from all of those classes of cities because of the way we've done something 10 years ago. I mean, that's a lot of money to say, all right, this is only going to be available to certain communities in Nebraska. And I think if people out in the state hear that, I don't think they'll be real pleased with it either.
But I think to be clear, just to make sure that we understand, our message, we're sharing that information. We want them to look at it. They are the decision maker. We can't extend the credit to the state. So if they are invested and they believe they have a project that could, we have limited resources and we're offering limited assistance, but we are not necessarily saying you're on your own. We have provided crash data. We have provided some of the traffic data, whatever is available that we can. What I think we're saying though, we're not going and spending $60,000-$80,000 on a grant to write it for somebody.
No,
And we are not necessarily sitting there, we're gonna go promote and talk to elected officials and decide if your project is good or not.
I
So that
understand,
we're
I
doing
agree
that.
with you on that part. I'm thinking about more, the grant side of it, the preliminary side of it's gotta be on the locals. I'm thinking more in, what you call it, the
Post-award.
post-award side of it, when now you've gotta meet all these guidelines and have the trained individual checking all the boxes that, yeah, they actually did this. That's where, I think the cities are pretty good at writing grants. I mean, they still do that for various levels, but they don't have that LPA there to manage a project if they get it. Most of the first-class Cs, they've quit going to the training sessions that were put on by federal aid 10 years ago.
Yeah, and
By the federal.
I'm glad you mentioned that,
FHWA,
Commissioner,
so-
so I wanna put your mind at ease and, Commissioner Copples, when they are awarded projects that become really a federalized projects, we have engaged all of them as an RC. So we take that process, still, it's not really our dollars, we still charge it to that federal program, but it comes through us. We process that. And right now, we have committed to the limited number of people. The Blair is a good example, Omaha, we are the one who are actually helping them with the reporting through Federal Highway with some of the grants that we got. And we did that because some of those folks still get some, for example, a grade separation, safety projects. So they're not completely out of the federal game per se. When I said that, is just the majority of them are. But there's a lot of cities, the Columbus, the Norfolk, that are still after safety project, after some other type of federal funds. And we are the RC, the responsible charge. We take that and we process it for them. We just, the onset, the evaluation projects and applying for the grants is what we're describing, that we're not out of the game.
That makes sense to me, so I was more worried about the after the fact, and I'm glad to hear you're still willing to do that. I think that should put their mind.
That's something we're working on too, because we don't know the exact number of these local grants that are gonna be coming out. It'd be interesting to see. We don't want to limit local agencies from applying, when they go ahead and apply, but once we find out how many numbers we have, we're gonna be working with NDOT and ourselves, and the local agencies on how to, on those post-award requirements, making sure everything's met. But that's something that, even in federal highways, where we realize it's gonna take a lot more effort, and how we're gonna work with the state on meeting those and the local agencies. We're still working through that.
Okay, good, thank you.
So as far as DOT here, you've outlined a couple projects that we're going to apply for, right? Is there ongoing funding, and are there other projects that we're looking at in the future?
So yeah, I mean, that's the plan. We've been talking about this internally. It's just all these new opportunities. How do we sort of figure out what we're going to go after? And so we've sort of come up with this concept of like, we've got years, this year, next year, right, but 15 different grant programs. Which projects fill in? We're going to create some sort of matrix that just describe sort of our plan for how we're going to pursue these. The challenge is we're still waiting for guidance on like those there are more than 10 of those that are still coming out. So we've had 4 that have come out, at least that we can apply for. Well, maybe it's more than that, but RAISE, infra, mega, rural, those are very traditional. There's also been a ports one, which we weren't going to apply for, and maybe a bus facility one that maybe we're going to apply, but on behalf of locals. But anyways, the ones that we're used to applying for our highway projects, yes, we're going to be trying to track those down, and the ones that are coming out, it's reading that NOFO, looking at our projects. Does it fit with this? Can we meet the timing requirements? Will we have enough cash flow for it to match it? So Amy and my group and Khalil will be sort of working through that to create that plan.
So they have to be through the design phase, environmental phase.
It's helpful.
Huh?
It's helpful.
Well, some are split. Some have funding available for planning.
Yeah, that's true.
So you can apply. It's a smaller amount.
Yeah.
But again, you need to have more than just a napkin thought as to what you're trying to do. But it can take you further along with that. So there's a lot of different approaches.
You really need to read, when that notice of funding opportunity comes out, each one is different, and the local agency or whatever it is really needs to read that and see what the requirements are. But the farther along you are, they're really looking for projects that are ready to go. There's that commitment there. And so if you have the environmental work done and you're well into design, then you have a foot ahead in the process.
I mean, does, like, the project from McCook to North Platte, does any of that qualify? Super 2 or?
None at this time. I mean, obviously, we have that in our program, and we'll seek some of those key rural opportunity. We'll see where that fits for us better. Sometimes, you know, to go request a few $1 million, we continue to evaluate the amount of headache we get sometimes with that compare. So it's funded, you know, we probably gonna focus more onto future opportunities from Alliance North, future opportunities in the Heartland, you know, expressway system for now. Some of the small ones, you know, it's really a serious evaluation because, I mean, I'll give you an example. This grants that Ryan is talking about, that multimodal that came, that's 3 grants. That's almost 100-page review that you have to go through. And you really can't skip a page. It's not like you scan and you move on. You have to read every page because there will be something in there that you got to pay attention to. Now, granted, some of them start to look the same, but it's still 100 pages. And unfortunately, those are the things that where the investment needs to be evaluated. Where do we go after and what? And that's the matrix that Ryan is talking about. And I think it's going to help us down the road the next year because these are going to be cyclical. Every year they're going to come out. And year 2, we're going to be a little bit better. Year 3, we're probably going to have this, you know, probably unless they change the game on us, which they're very good at that. And so if they don't change the criteria and it continues, then I think we're going to be in better shape in year 3 and year 4 and year 5.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions for Ryan? No, thank you very much for your presentation. Next on our agenda is a 6-lane expansion, I-80 Lincoln to Pleasantdale. Our presenter is Kyle Keller, who is the Assistant Roadway Design Engineer.
Good morning, Director Selmer, members of the Highway Commission. Again, my name is Kyle Keller, Assistant Roadway Design Engineer. I handle mostly projects in District 1 and District 7 with a focus on project delivery and managing the scope, schedule, budget of the project through that delivery process. I do have the privilege today to discuss our I-80 expansion from Lincoln to Pleasantdale. I've scanned the room before I got up here. I think most of us here are of driving age and have probably driven this corridor. And probably know what I'm talking about here when I talk about this Lincoln to Pleasantdale. But you know, just in case, we are going to just orient ourselves of where we're talking about. Nice graphic, by the way, Ryan. So this project is west of Lincoln on the I-80 corridor. Project starts at the 388 exit or the Pleasantdale Creek interchange, or northwest 156th Street, just kind of west of that. It extends 7.6 miles towards east towards Lincoln, and ends at just west of northwest 56th Street. So when I talk about those limits, that's the actual pavement widening, reconstruction of the pavement work. From northwest 56th Street to northwest 48th Street, we're going to have to do some restriping, pavement marking, reconfigure those existing lanes to create the continuous 3 lanes to match into the new construction. So now that we know where we are, let's talk about scope of the project. The improvements are to expand this from existing 4-lane segment to 6 lanes. We are widening the existing outside shoulders from 10 feet to 12 feet. We are creating a concrete or paved median with a concrete barrier separation. We are doing some culvert drainage work, so we'll be extending those, modifying, replacing, adding as necessary. We'll be updating guardrail as necessary. In terms of structures, we have two sets of mainline bridges in the corridor, as well as we have some overhead structures as well. One of those is going to be repaired, And then northwest 126th, 112th, and 98th overhead structure will be replaced with this project. So now that we know where we are in the scope of this project, let's discuss a little bit about the need of the project and the challenges that are being faced of this corridor. We've separated this into 3 different categories. However, they really all intertwine together. But again, we'll just kind of focus on those 3 separate, really the need of the project and the challenges facing the corridor. The first is safety concerns. And when I talk about safety, I'm not saying that this corridor is unsafe. So, but with like any other project, we're looking at ways to improve the overall safety. Right now, this corridor is experiencing some crash rates that exceed our statewide average. So like any other project, we're looking at improving that safety, reliability, and moving that traffic more efficiently. We also experience some issues with just maintenance and overlay projects with this corridor. We cannot reduce the lanes, the number of lanes, so we have to keep both lanes open to traffic during the day, or else we experience some backups and potential increase for crashes. So our solution is to create new 6-lane pavement. Again, have that 28-foot median with concrete barrier, widen the shoulders, update the guardrail. The next is deteriorating infrastructure. So the existing roadway, the pavement structure, the culverts, originally created in 1962. I know the slide talks about guardrail. I can assure you there's no guardrail out there from 1962. But really right now, we've done, since then, we've done maintenance projects, we've done overlay projects. There comes a point in time where those asset preservation projects are really no longer a viable option. Right now, this is at a stage to where we can stay ahead of the optimal replacement for this project. And so again, it's kind of at that end of the optimal life. And so we're trying to stay ahead of that and prevent a loss of functionality of the interstate. And so our solution is to reconstruct the corridor and then really save on those annual maintenance costs. One of the biggest needs for this project and the challenges facing this corridor is just the overall congestion. I-80 is a primary freight corridor of the Midwest, has a high volume of truck traffic. I know that everyone here has driven it, have experienced that. The two semis trying to pass each other with, seems like it takes 10 minutes. The corridor is acting right now at a level of service C. Right now, our traffic division has forecasted a 30% increase in overall ADT over the next 20 years. And within 5 years, this corridor could be operating at a level of service D. Really what that means is that free flow, it's already reduced, will continue to reduce, speeds will continue to reduce, and the overall comfort of the driver driving through there is going to be reduced. So, and as I mentioned, just overall preservation of this asset, those maintenance projects, overlay projects, we struggle with those because we cannot reduce lanes during the day, so those have to be special provisions for night work, which drives up our costs for the bids. We have fewer contractors bidding on those, and again, we're seeing inflated prices for those types of projects. So really, our overall solution is to widen this, increase capacity, and help the safety and reliability of this corridor. Here's a fun little graphic that just shows I-80 compared to some other major highways in Nebraska. I-80 is the green bar, and compared to the yellow. You can see that 77 and Highway 2 are the next closest, and they're approaching about 4,000 trucks per day, whereas you can see I-80 is nearly 10,000 a day. So we've talked a lot about this widening from 2 lanes in each direction to 3 lanes. Let's just kind of wanted to show you a graphical representation of what that's going to look like. So that top exhibit you see is the existing typical section out there, 2 lanes of traffic in each direction. We have our 64-foot median separating those. Below is 3 lanes of traffic in each direction. We have the 20-foot median and the concrete barrier separation. So as mentioned, again, we cannot close lanes during the day. So we're looking at, and during this design phase, we're looking really hard at how do we design and phase this so that we keep the 2 lanes of travel open as much as possible, or really at all times. So here's just a really high-level representation of what that phasing is going to look like, so we can maintain traffic out here. If we look at that phase 1 that's on the top, that red hatched portion you see, that'll be the first part that's constructed. We do show the the concrete barrier in the middle on this screen just as a representation. Doesn't mean it necessarily has to be constructed right away. And so that will be the first phase. In phase 2, that red portion that was built in phase 1 turns to the green hatched, and we shift traffic onto that. And then on the left side of the screen on phase 2, you see that red hatched portion that'll be constructed. Then in phase 3, traffic's moved all into that left side of the screen and that green hatched, and then we build the alternate build in that red hatched area. So again, creating that 3 lanes of traffic in each direction. So we've talked a lot about expansion. We've talked a lot about widening on the inside, but why are we looking at widening on the inside? Well, one, again, that forecasting of a 30% growth of ADT through this area, as well as our planning and forecasting is showing a more urbanized development of Lincoln here towards the west. We feel this typical is going to meet what the future of what's going to be out here. We also see a safety benefit in creating a barrier. So most of you might know a project that's going to be going on west of here that we're actually creating a high tension cable barrier in the median. And so we're seeing a big cost benefit to, even though we have this wide median, to put a barrier in the center to prevent those crossover crashes. So this again kind of fits the need of and improving that safety benefit through the corridor. With this widening on the inside, we also eliminate the need for right-of-way, and we reduce our overall environmental footprint, which reduces the time it takes to deliver this project, and also increases our ability to deliver this project on time. So let's discuss just kind of the current status of where we are. So we started preliminary engineering almost a year ago, and so that engineering has been our focus to support the other entities throughout the division. One is for our environmental documents, so we have a CE document or categorical exclusion for the NEPA process. We have again, we have no right of way on this project, and so we're not anticipating any of that. Kind of to Ryan's presentation, this project is slotted for one that we're going for a grant for right now. Overall project cost is, we're looking at around $128, $130 million, and we're applying for grant opportunity to maximize that, which is around $77 million for this project. Right now, we've scheduled this project to begin construction in 2024. This is probably around a 3-year project, so around, this could be again open to traffic and the 3 lanes in each direction, and around 2027 if we stay on the current schedule. So with that, I'll open it up to any questions you have.
Go ahead.
I was going to ask if there are any questions from the commission, and there are.
So what are the plans as far as DOT for moving west on the interstate, widening?
We have continued plan. I mean, obviously, we still see a need to continue to go west. There's always a lot of talks of getting all the way towards Grand Island. This is our current focus right now. As again, overall cost. I mean, again, even getting to Pleasantdale, we're looking at around $130 million. We're looking to supplement that with grant opportunities, but we are still looking at, and really that in lines with, again, that increase. We're seeing that nearly 30% increase of ADT through that area to Pleasantdale. Beyond that, there's different segments that are kind of, they've dropped off to around 10, even though, again, it has high volumes. We're still like, we're still focusing on that need, but yeah, we do continue to plan to move west. We're focused on this now, and then we'll keep moving west. Khalil, do you want to add in?
Yeah, exactly what Kyle said, Commissioner, and we're monitoring the level of service.
So is that what's going to drive it, the ADT?
I think we're correctly. I think right now is the asset condition itself. I mean, we overlaid this until the cows come home. Now, there's a time where we're going to have to do something. So when we replace the 4-lane, we believe that's the right opportunity, to add that additional. So it's level of service and asset condition is going to drive this. With the funding, we have to make sure that all 3 categories are balanced, but with the grants opportunity, we're going to probably maximize that as best as we can when we have the opportunity. But the goal is right now is what we're showing the need, and what the director has been presenting to the legislature every year is the 6-lane all the way to Grand Island. Right now, we do have in the program, Amy's, when you mentioned the program, I think you're gonna see both segments all the way to Seward is probably in the next horizon, the next 5 years, still showing as a planning approach to hopefully we can get there.
So are you gonna do the widening to the inside, and this, what you're proposing here, this section is just gonna continue? Because it seems to me like that level of service C starts at York right now, coming
Well,
out. I mean, that's
and Greg, that's,
easily-
I was at, my question was, and kind of plays into what Doug was, if I remember right, you said that you would be at a level D of service on that section in 5 years.
We're forecasting that.
What's the level of service currently, and
C.
what will it be in 5 years of the next section?
I don't know the next, I imagine it might be close to the C on, as it continues, or B.
And I realize there's financial constraints, there's a lot of different things that play into it.
Yeah, so when we modeled that, Commissioner, I mean, we used the historic growth at one time, and we have an aggressive growth, both of them. And the aggressive growth that we were anticipating, that didn't really pan out, but we were expecting that all the way to Seward to be in the level of service C. In some segment, it's better than that. You see our highways, north and south, sometimes there's certain junctions that traffic drops in there. Historic growth is showing a steady level of C, and probably a lot longer than 5 years before it drops to a D. Again, I think it's Highway 81 at York is completely a unique junction there where we're seeing some considerable drops, but it doesn't mean that the growth won't shift on us. I think for us is really the 3 bullets that I was describing to you. We got to make sure the funding, but both also the conditions. I mean, we're in Mick's old job before he came in, when he was the M&R engineer. That was his mission, is to really just extend the life of these payments as much as possible, because we just did not have $150 million every time to go take care of that. So I think it's a balanced approach.
Thank you.
Go ahead, did you have? As we 6-lane it, I'm traveling other interstates, a lot of them have gone to the right lane is truck only. Are we looking at doing that?
Right, 2 lanes.
Well, but do you build those lanes then differently? Do you add, because truck volume is getting so high on Interstate 80, I mean, and that's of course causing, us to lose a lot of the asphalt or concrete or whatever. I mean, I know that's difficult, so.
We'll ask Nick Sislo to answer your
Yeah,
question.
so actually the driving factor, you're correct, is the truck volume, and that decides the thickness of the pavement structure.
Right.
And so right now, we do design both lanes the same. And then if we go to the 6th lane, we are also, and a lot of that has to do with economics when you're out there, a lot of it has to do with enforcement. You do have traditionally higher volumes in your outside 2 lanes or your outside lane if you have a 4-lane. And so, but when the contractors build it, they like to pull the whole width the same, and so having various thicknesses, and it actually requires them to do it twice, and actually adds more cost than if you just keep the same thickness for both sections. But yes, you're correct, we do design for that heavy truck traffic. And then if there was a OV lane or something that was designated that says trucks cannot use this, then that would be maybe a different consideration where we would maybe do that. But right now, without an enforced trucks cannot go over here, that we would design it the same across the section.
We do want to answer your question. Currently, I think the thinking is we will continue in urban sections to Seward. Now things could change and we could shift to a rural with the 84, or it depends on, or 88 feet wide. But I think, it's all about economics. It's all about the right of way and the impacts. And,
Makes sense, yeah.
Yeah, and so, we're thinking that could be the method. Don't know how far we can go out west with something like that. I know that my design team is always challenging us to say, nah, you can't do that. I think we will have certain analysis and we'll do it and convince ourselves if that's the right typical we use or not.
A lot of that has to do with maintenance as well. As we get into the rural section, where you're interchanges are. I mean, obviously, right now, we have maintenance turnarounds and those, and so if you have that continuous barrier, that's something we have to make sure we adjust for maintenance and safety for people to be able to get through there, emergency type stuff, and then also for snow control, that kind of thing, so.
Hugh, are there any other questions? No.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kyle. The next thing on our agenda is the US 81 Hebron R-Cut update with Mick Seislow, our roadway design engineer.
Good morning, Commissioners, Director. I am going to talk about Hebron, but I presented to you at different capacities of my career, but I haven't for quite a while, so I thought it would be maybe prudent of me to introduce myself a little bit so that maybe you know me. So I have been with the department for 28 years. I started in roadway design back in '94, stayed with design in different capacities, rural, expressway, interstate for 10 years. And in 2004, I moved over to materials and research. I was the pavement design engineer and materials and research for 7 years. And when Mo Jamshidi became deputy director, I replaced him as the division head of materials and research. And I was the division head over materials and research for the past 10 years. And then Mike Owen, the previous roadway design engineer, retired in November. And so I came over here to become the roadway design engineer. And that's my current capacity. And thankfully, in all the positions I've had, height has not been a requirement. So I have that going. So hopefully that stays true. But anyway, all right. So let's talk about Hebron. So I kind of want to give you a little background on the project, just kind of how we got here, and then kind of some of the details of the project itself. As you probably are aware, we do have a strategic safety infrastructure projects team. That team is 11 members, mostly NDOT, and of that, we're a wide group of us from all divisions, district. Traffic takes the primary role for us. Federal Highway is a partner on that team as well. With this committee, what we do is we evaluate the safety needs of the state. We use there's different funding pots for things that we do. And so this one happens to use our HSIP, our federal safety funds. And with that, we do a project selection and a program management of that whole system. And when we're looking at projects, we basically kind of have three type of projects we're looking for. One would be a spot location, which would be like an intersection improvement. Another one would be like maybe more of a corridor level protection or project, which would be several miles. You could think of the cable median guardrail project as a corridor level that utilizes this kind of funding. And we have a systematic type of approach that we can also use this funding for. And with that systematic are things like our 28-foot top widening, where we put rumble strips on the outside of the roadway. That we use as a systematic approach, and we use safety funds for that as well. And so when we're looking for projects and allocating them, we're looking for that safety benefit. We're targeting the zero fatality, and that's our goal, is to continue to target those high benefit projects. And that's really where we're at with this project as well. So for today, then, we'll jump into, with the selection of that project done by Hebron in Nebraska. This project started off as a spot location project. As I described, there's various levels, and with that spot location project, doesn't like that animation, does it?
No, it doesn't. Coming.
So let's just kind of zoom into Hebron. So it started with a spot location, but it evolved into 7 intersections that we evaluated along this corridor. And so as we get into those, we'll kind of describe them at a high level, just to kind of let you know where we kind of ended up with this safety improvement. So, spot improvement that I was talking about is at Dove Road. That's that north intersection that has fatalities recently that drove a safety committee to review and evaluate that intersection. And in reviewing that, and the solution we came up with, all this drove us to look at that whole corridor along there. With that corridor review, we changed the project to more of a corridor improvement safety project rather than just a spot project at Dove Road. So as we looked at that project, as I kind of mentioned, we went down and we looked at the rest of the corridor. As we got through some of those intersections showed that they had high level crash rates compared to our state average. And it drove us to, as we decided on a solution for what we were going to be doing for that Dove Road, that we had to make sure we keep those other intersections in our thoughts and as we designed our process through them. 70 mile an hour is the speed limit through this corridor of 81, as it is with most of 81. And 81 here, then as you look at this segment and these intersections, the ADTs in this area at most of these intersections that have the higher rate are above 5,000. And so that's a pretty heavy load of traffic going through those intersections. The proposed solution that we have is what we call an R-cut, which is a restricted crossing U-turn. You're probably familiar with it as we've used it up at Humphrey, Nebraska, and I'll kind of show you some examples of that as we move forward. With that kind of design and how we lead up to those kind of designs, we have to evaluate what we have for the facility out there, what's been done already. We progress through different elements of looking at safety. It can be simply, advanced warning systems or signs, increased signalization, geometric adjustments, all the way up to when we start looking at these kind of geometric improvements where we're looking at maybe roundabouts on 2 lanes or R-cuts or median cuts, and we have different things that we can do with those all the way up to full-blown interchange if we have the needs for it and the warrants for it. With this particular case, the R-cut was the solution that we believe will serve the community the best and maintain the system as far as 81 traffic. With this R-cut, we'll show in a second then that most of these intersections had problems with the minor road crossing and being hit by the main line 81. That resulted in about 67% of the accidents that we saw out there. And of that, not only is that 67% of the accidents, those are typically your higher injury, fatality type accidents, major severity accidents. And so an R-cut reduces that movement, and in fact it eliminates most of that, so that at the end of the day, that in itself, by eliminating that movement, resolves that solution or those incidents for us. And I'll kind of get into that detail in just a second with some of the charts. As I mentioned, we did look at this as a corridor, so essentially we are representing 7 intersections. That gets to be where trying to build this all in one phase was going to be very difficult. So we broke the project into 2 phases, a north phase and a south phase. Each is about $4+ million. And we did that for the fact that we can get one built and it can function as a safety benefit to the part of the community, and then as we build into the second, it'll continue to add to the safety of the whole corridor. We took this solution, which again is high level. Right now it came out of the committee as a project. We went down to the city of Hebron. We met with the mayor and a few city council members about a month and a half ago, March 24th. At that meeting, we presented this conceptual idea to them that I'll show you in a minute. And this conceptual idea was approved by them and very supportive. And after that, we asked them to take it to the city council, offered to come back to the full city council if they wanted us to. They elected that they felt very comfortable doing it on their own. They met as a city council and provided us with a written resolution of support for the project. And that's something we're starting to do a lot more on these projects, is before we really get into the design of the project, we really want to get with the community, not only for information like we always have, but actually ask them for a written resolution up front that shows from the city leaders that they have buy-in, that they're supportive of it, they're representing the community as a whole. And so we've had really good results with that since we've been doing that process. So we got that resolution, and it now has been programmed. The project is currently sitting, I believe, in a 2025 fiscal year project, and so it'll move forward through the design process from here moving forward. So what you're going to see today is, again, the conceptual high level. Basically, these are images on top of aerials. This is not a design level project yet. Not even a PowerPoint yet. So this is how an R-cut works. And maybe, again, you guys have seen this since we did this up in Humphrey, Nebraska. So basically what this does is it restricts that across the median movement. The traffic that's either wanting to, say, in this particular case, from the bottom of the screen on the minor roadway B, wanting to go across and go either straight across or, say, turn left northbound into the Highway 53 here in this example, would take a right out, would travel down, would travel through a designated U-turn section and come back around. And at the time they have the option then to continue north or to the west, and then or straight through. And so that's kind of the basic movement of an R-cut. We have an example.
Can we play it?
Hold on, I have an example just coming up, and so I was kind of just preparing you for it because we've had hit and miss with the video. But just wanted to really emphasize one more time that the conflict resolution that we see with this is, if we have a traditional intersection, which is represented on the left, that's an existing intersection, there's about 32 points of conflict on that intersection, meaning that 32 points and where vehicles can collide. After this improvement, if we would do an R-cut into this conventional intersection, we reduce that from 32 to 14. So over half of the conflicts are removed. And more importantly, as I kind of alluded to earlier, if you looked at the ones that are crossing movements, the ones that are the high severity type of accidents, those are greatly reduced from the bulk of the conflicts down to the minority of the conflicts. And so that's why we are targeting these kind of safety improvements. And I hope this may work. This is what we built up in District 3. Oh, you didn't like it at all, huh?
No, I'm doing it.
And so up in Humphrey, we went out there and, you know, obviously it's you have to move out, you have to go south and just basically create a U-turn. So originally we did this project up there. We went up there, met with the community. There was some public concern about having to go out of your way to make a through movement or to make a turn movement. But obviously the safety benefits of the project, we believe, outweighed, you know, what was occurring out there. The project has now been in place for over a year. It was one of our, if not the highest, safety concerning project out there for an intersection. We've had 0 accidents to my knowledge since this has been constructed, which I can't tell you that we're going to see that on every one of these, but that is an amazing improvement to one of the highest incident rated. It's kind of jumping all over the place, so you can't really see it. Maybe it's not even.
Our online viewers are getting a seamless view. It's just
Oh, are they? Oh, it's just this here. Okay, well, I apologize again for the video, but this is really just to represent how the trucks do make their movement, their pause, and that it is designed to handle the heavy truck traffic and the heavy truck movements with that bulb that we have there. There are some things that we did learn from this project that we're going to adjust in our design, and that's actually after they start turning their movement, we do allow for them, as you can kind of see there, they merge right back into traffic. We do carry that. We now have where we try to maintain a lane all the way up to the intersection so that they don't have to merge right back in. So that as the traffic turns and does that movement, they can stay off if they're going to be turning on to the straight through movement versus all the way coming to the top. But that's kind of a view to the intersection. It kind of seems like we're kind of getting all that pieces back and forth. So let's just go ahead and bump it. Okay, so then let's go back to the project itself. We're going to start at the top end with phase 1. We're going to be looking at the very initial top 2 intersections here where Dove Road is at, and then it's County Road at 6200 as well. As this zooms in, it's going to turn and pivot. North is to the right. So then what we're looking at doing here is closing. It's shown in red, the county road that comes around. And then we're going to put the R-cut in the Dove Road intersection. I got a little animation maybe here just to kind of reiterate how that would function. You can see a truck wanting to go either straight across or north would go actually south, come down, U-turn through the bulb and come back. They can stay in that off-turn lane to either turn right or they have the option to go through and merge back in. And so that's the basic movements of these R-cuts. And again, this community was very supportive of us. We talked through a lot of scenarios, closing the roadway, the movements that they see out here, and they felt this was a good solution to what we were putting out there. Some of these R-cuts, as we move down through the project, are going to get wider and longer, just because of kind of the lay of the terrain out there. Kind of maybe you can see that if the next segment, you can see it's a rather large square compared to the first one. It's representing a few intersections in there. And so these R-cut movements as they move through are moving through a couple intersections. And that's because of this terrain out there. If you're not familiar with it by Hebron, we do have a little bit of a vertical. You can see there's curves involved in the horizontal. So in other words, we really needed to make sure that we captured sight distance properly. So as vehicles are doing their U-turn movement, they have plenty of sight distance to do that, and people approaching them have plenty of sight distance. So that's part of the reason for the stretched areas, that those bulbs are in locations where we believe have the best sight distance. Just kind of briefly go through the next few segments. Now we jump down to phase 2, which is following project that will not be part of phase one. This involves the actual Highway 136 intersection itself. And with this one too, again, we would have that same kind of configuration. You cannot, you are allowed to turn off of the main line through the median, but you cannot cross through the median with the 136. I'm gonna just keep stepping through because these are all very similar. But I do want to, as we do these improvements, some of the things we have to do is close some of the intersections out there. And so that was some of the conversation we had with communities, these bulbs and stuff that we put out there on some of these county roads. We did have to close. Again, that was maybe part of where we talked about the most with the community. They are still in support of it, understand what we are doing with that. They expressed that maybe that would be something that more as we get into our future public meetings, that those are going to be areas of future conversation that we'll have to continue to work through. And then lastly, the last intersection. We do safety improvements and geometric improvements at that intersection. This one's a little unique in the fact that it's not really associated with the R-cut because people going north would go up and take 136, people heading south would just come out of here. And so there was no R-cut needed for this movement out of there to head north. Kind of a quick run through of the project, but again, we believe it will add some great safety benefit to that community, and we are ready to move forward with the project. Any questions?
Any questions from the commissioners?
Just a comment, though, I know the community is really gonna appreciate that, because there's been some, we've had Hebron come a number of times and ask for lights and signage and
Speed limits.
and still we have fatalities there. It's a very difficult intersection, so I applaud you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mick, for your presentation. Appreciate that. We've reached the public input part of our agenda. Are there any letters for the record?
No, I have not received them.
Okay, thank you. Are there any who wish to address the commission? If so, come forward and state your name and your last name when you address the podium. Any public input here? Seeing none. As remarks, I really don't have any remarks except I thank you and your team and all of you professionals out here who've worked so hard to improve and make safe our roads in Nebraska. I know it's a never-ending project because you don't have those public and drivers that don't always pay attention to what they should be. But with that, you've done a great job at putting together plans for not only this year, but on into the future. And I thank you very much for doing that. Sarah, would you give our calendar?
Yeah, sorry, making sure nobody else went. You could comment. The next scheduled Highway Commission meeting is on June 24th. We'll be at the Holiday Inn Express in Alliance at 8:30. And that, everything else is getting scheduled. I'll most likely have quite a few updates for you next month.
Okay, thank you, Sarah.
Yep.
Is there any other business to come before the commission? If not, the meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dave.